Rupa Haq. Rupa.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to follow up with from some of the questions that Barry Shearman was asking. I'm a London MP. I represent lots of people who work in financial services, which, as we know, is kind of much bigger than fisheries and some of the other more emotional things that people understand about this. Do we see any kind of financial passporting in the bare bones agreement we are expecting? I know whenever I have asked Michael Gove this question, he said it will be all right on the night this is coming. I just wondered what the three of you predict is going to happen there.
So I think what we understand that sits within the current FTA text between both sides is absolutely not passporting or nothing like it. There's nothing in there that currently synthesizes or looks remotely close to passporting. So we think we can answer that quite directly. I think what's currently in there is minimal provisions that you would see in very basic free trade agreements for financial services. So potentially the establishment rights of a branch in another jurisdiction, but whilst you may be able to establish a branch in Germany, the Netherlands or France, what you don't have, unless you fully subsidiarize there, is you don't have passporting them within the European Union. What you do have is additional frictional costs because you're applying to two different regimes, an increased cost of capital and liquidity, and that those costs have to fall somewhere. It might be in the form of increased product and service charges or elsewhere. What I would say is that the test of success for financial services won't always be within a free trade agreement. And I think it's important that deal or no deal, that we empower our regulatory authorities to continue to have that regulatory diplomacy and continue to engage with their EU counterparts and their international counterparts, because there's an incredible amount you can do between MOU agreements and sharing of information between regulators that can enable recognition and market access, albeit without a free trade agreement, there may well be a loss of political and economic goodwill that could have otherwise been deployed in, for example, tying up any final equivalence determinations. But on the face of it, what's currently in the free trade agreement is incredibly minimalistic, directly speaking, for financial services.
Just add a couple of comments. I mean, coming back to an earlier reference to what the UK has done, so the UK has absolutely sought to ensure that inbound financial services, so that typically will either be in two areas. One is where an EEA headquartered bank has a branch in London, or through asset management arrangements, there is delegation of asset management activity into asset managers in London. Those two areas are being effectively protected through either MOUs or the temporary permission agreement. So that enables the UK to continue to provide a level of support and service into Europe, but it is not the same as servicing EU clients, which we lose the passport for.
I mean, how ready do you think that the UK financial services sector is for the end of passporting? It's quite a major big bang compared to what's happened in the decades before.
I'm very happy to go here, Andrew. Maybe you could add some points on top. To reiterate my earlier points, the financial services industry, certainly our members, have been preparing incredibly hard since 2016. So I think they're as prepared as they can be by a mixture of understanding what national laws are in the European Union, setting up branches and getting new regulatory authorization across the EU to continue to service their clients. It's incredibly difficult to figure out and articulate how leaving 40 years of laws and regulation will actually manifest itself, and I don't think you can ever be fully inoculated from leaving the single market. So we may well see some operational disruption next year. We may see some light market dipping, but we don't know what that will look like in practice or to what degree. What I would say is I think the regulatory authorities in the United Kingdom have done an incredible amount to soften that exit and to enable UK-based firms to transition into a new regime relatively safely. And it goes back to what Andrew said a moment ago about a temporary permissions regime for branches of EU firms still currently operating in the United Kingdom, as well as having a temporary transition tool to alleviate some of the administrative burden on top of UK firms continuing to operate within the United Kingdom. So in summary, yes, it's an incredibly big change, and the world from January next year will be very, very different to the one we're in now, deal or no deal for financial services. But I think the regulatory tools that are in place should alleviate and soften the blow to some extent.
Just lastly, do you think that the effects will be sort of felt spread evenly across the sector, or do you think there are some parts that will fare better than others? I think, Neil, you've not answered one yet. Anything to add?
I think I would have to defer to Conor and Andrew specifically on these points.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, I mean, most of the big banks who are the most internationally active, I mean, you know, if you break the sectors down, you know, asset management is very internationally active. International banking is, retail banking is actually quite domestic. Much of insurance is actually more domestic, with the exception of some international wholesale business and reinsurance. And it is those international sectors which are going to be most impacted. If you take a large internationally active bank, it will have spent the last 3 or 4 years, or since almost the moment the referendum results came in, thinking about how to readjust its business model. It will have spent more than £100 million in doing so. It will have need to establish or build out a subsidiary in another European location. It will broadly be ready. Will it be 100% ready? Will there be slight, you know, wrinkles and problems and bumps for some of its clients and some of its people? Yes. But is it going to represent a systemic risk? I think that's unlikely.
Okay.
Thanks.